Well, guys, he did it. Oda completely surpassed my expectations once again with my favorite entry in the series thus far. Now, I know this is high praise, but I'll be getting into why this praise is warranted shortly. Before I do, however, and as always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and join the Discord server by clicking the link in the description of the video. I know some members of my community might not be One Piece fans now, but if you're interested in learning more, make sure to join in and acclimate yourself to the series by watching the anime with other new One Piece fans by participating in One Piece Friday. Now, with that being said, let's jump into my review of Volume 6, The Oath, featuring chapters 45 to 53. Part 1, Don Krieg. This will cover chapters 45 to 48. This section of the story has a lot of moving parts, so let me start out with something simple. That being the first meeting of Sanji and Luffy. Luffy picks up right where he ended off in the last volume and implores Sanji to join his crew, but Sanji refuses, saying that he will stay at Baratie because a Baratie is a realization of Chef Zeph's dream, and Sanji wants to support him in this endeavor. Once again, Luffy hears about a man's dream, and I feel like I've heard this somewhere before.
I understood that reference.
This is where Gin, the member of the Don Krieg pirate crew who Sanji fed, brings up a recurring point of discussion in this volume, that being the dangers of traveling the Grand Line. Luffy of course ignores this and starts wreaking havoc on the ship, not purposefully but just through attempting to carry out his new tasks as a chore boy. This is also when we catch up with the remainder of the crew and watch as Sanji becomes acclimated with the crew. Well, becomes acclimated with Nami. All of this is simply the calm before the storm, however, as Don Krieg arrives on the brink of death, and as he does, the atmosphere becomes tense. I love how Don Krieg's arrival is contradictory to what people know about him. Don Krieg is said to have a fleet of 50 ships and over 5,000 men, but when his ship arrives, it looks rough, nearly destroyed. Don Krieg himself is introduced as a man who is the most feared pirate in the East Blue, but is shown to us as a man who is starving and on the brink of death. This is something that Polly wants to use to their advantage, defeating him while they have a chance. But this idea is short-lived, as in the midst of Polly's planning, Sanji gives Krieg a bowl of food. Sanji once again saw Krieg as a human being in need of food and not as a dangerous pirate. But Krieg's nature as a master of deception comes out as he punches Sanji and demands the chefs prepare food for his dying men, something that Sanji agrees to, even as he is stopped at gunpoint by his fellow chefs. Sanji tells both his fellow chefs and the audience what his philosophy is. If a man is hungry, I will feed him. While all of this is going down, Zeph takes charge and has prepared food for the Krieg pirates. I love this scene as it gives us a subtle look into the relationship of Zeph and Sanji, as it is clear that Sanji's worldview is inspired by Zeph, and despite the two's constant bickering, Sanji cares for Zeph. The relationship between Sanji and Zeph is not dissimilar to the relationship between a certain rubber boy and his one-armed mentor, but we'll come back to this in a future installment. This is when a big bomb is dropped on the audience, as Krieg seems taken aback by the mention of Zeph's name. It turns out that Zeph was once known as Redfoot Zeph, a notorious pirate captain and someone who managed to travel the Grand Line for over a year. This instantly changes our perception of Zeph, as he has gone from being nothing more than a mere cook to now somebody who has vast experience as a pirate and has also traversed the Grand Line, the very destination we've been warned of. And if the Grand Line was not intimidating enough already, it is made abundantly clear through Don Krieg bringing up the fact that he only lasted 7 days once reaching the Grand Line. It is also important to mention that this is brought up after we see Krieg's regained strength, with him being able to bully the chefs and using his armored body to withstand Polly's attack. This leads to the conflict escalating, as Krieg demands that Zeph hand over both the Baratie ship along with his logbook, so Krieg can return to the Grand Line. And when Zeph refuses, this leads to a shocking revelation, setting up a huge fight undertaken by none other than Roanoa Zoro. Part 2, Dracule Hawkeye Mihawk. This will cover chapters 49 to 52. Now before we get to the obvious focus of this part of the story, let's talk about Nami. So, yeah, in the midst of everything going on with Don Krieg and the chefs, Nami yeeted Yosaku and Johnny off of the Going Merry and left to sail away. But mysteriously, we're shown Nami crying, voicing her desire to reunite with the crew at some later point. This isn't important now, but will be later. But what is important now is the reveal that Krieg's entire fleet was destroyed by one man. And what do you know? That man just made his grand entrance into the series. Dracule Hawkeye Mihawk's introduction is one of the best in the series so far, but let's take a minute to talk about his design. Mihawk's appearance is based on Dracula, as his name might suggest, and this is further highlighted by the fact that he is sailing the sea on nothing more than a floating casket. Not only does his design strike fear into the audience, but it is important to note that his first attack is cutting Krieg's ship in half, saying that he attacked Don Krieg for fun and being called the world's best swordsman, leading to the obvious confrontation, with Zoro stepping up to challenge him to a battle. Now, before we break down the battle, I have to say that Mihawk drops one of the coldest lines in all of literature, as he reveals that he will be fighting Zoro with nothing more than a small knife from his necklace, saying, "I'm not a fool who hunts rabbits with a cannon." I mean, damn. Mihawk needs to chill. This is when Zoro leaps into battle, using the memory of Kuina as motivation and his desire to become the world's best swordsman as fuel. And we watch on as Zoro loses. Yeah, he loses. Now, outside of how Zoro responds to Mihawk, I can't imagine being a first-time reader and witnessing this. For the vast majority of the story so far, we've watched Zoro dominate his opponents and never truly be behind in battle, until now. And not only does Zoro lose, but he's trounced, suffering a devastating loss. But interestingly, Zoro does not give up, and refuses to back down, telling Mihawk that backing down would be abandoning his dream, something Mihawk admires, and chooses to slice Zoro's chest with his black blade, as we watch Zoro fall into the ocean. Some things happening outside the battle I want to note involve Luffy preventing Yosaku and Johnny from getting involved in the battle, and while it's not obvious, Luffy is doing this to prevent them from interfering with his friend's dream, once again showing his admiration and respect for Zoro. We also watch the reactions as Zoro falls into the water, with Sanji telling Zoro that it is easy to abandon your dream. This brings me to what happened with Sanji in the lead up to the confrontation, with Sanji constantly telling Zoro how stupid his desire to face Mihawk was, and constantly being shocked by Zoro's tenacity. Despite all the pushback, all the mockery, and all the laughs, Zoro sought to achieve his dream, and even though he failed, he still attempted to reach his goal despite the obstacles, something Sanji seems to admire. All is not lost, however, as it is revealed that Zoro was not killed, and Mihawk purposefully left him alive. As it turns out, Mihawk respects Zoro's tenacity and wants to fight him again in the future, encouraging Zoro to train and find him again in the Grand Line. This is also where Zoro makes a vow to Luffy, that he will grow stronger every day and never lose again, as he does not want to disappoint the future king of the pirates. This sets things into motion as Usopp, Yosaku, Johnny, and an injured Zoro take off after Nami, while Luffy stays to defend the Baratie, setting up a climactic finish to this arc. Part 3, Luffy's Deal. This will cover chapter 53. I know this final part of the video only covers one chapter, and this is a case because of how much stuff happened to lead up to this chapter, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this part. But there are two main things that I want to point out from this chapter before we end the video off today. First, Luffy offers Zeph a deal, saying that if he manages to defeat Don Krieg, Zeph should let him go. Terms to which Zeph happily agrees, fearing for the future of his restaurant if Luffy hangs around. Secondly, we see Sanji's strength and fighting in action, as Sanji doesn't use his hands to fight, but rather his feet. Now, don't let this fool you. Sanji is no pushover, and in fact, Sanji's able to hit a mechanical ship away using only his foot. Power that will be needed as the Krieg pirates are closing in for their final attack. And that does it for today's episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and look for my reviews on volumes 7 and 8 next week. This has been the Nexus of Stories, and I will see you all next time. Take care.